Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may arise between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you do call in, staff will ask for your name and item number that you wish to address and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, you will have to press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will then be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for the presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All the delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties and answer the question from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of an application must provide a written request, preferably through email to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights from members of the public. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful to the members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. Do we have any regrets this evening? I see none. Declarations of pecuniary interests. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think I'll be taking a rather lengthy mid-meeting break. I've got a conflict on the 12 consecutive Hallett Homes applications, CAV 05 to 16, 2024. The applicant is related to a partner of my employer.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Talowski. Any other declarations? Okay. Madam Secretary Treasurer, I'll be taking requests for deferral or withdrawals of applications at this time. Do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to withdraw or defer an application? Please raise your hand and Secretary Treasurer will invite you in to speak.
Yes, my name is Joe Dome, 133 Torresdale Avenue. I'm representing 17 Rain Avenue. After reading the planning staff comments, the owner would like to request to defer the application to allow an opportunity to revise the drawings and improve the variances.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Dome. Any questions of Mr. Dome at this time? No, okay, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
My name is Addison Milne Price. I'm a planner, design plan services located at 900 the East Mall, Suite 300. I'm here on behalf of the owner for 420 Avenue Crescent, and I'm requesting a deferral.
Okay, I'm assuming that you will be speaking to town staff with respect to the comments made and working to present us with a new application.
That is correct, Madam Chair. Upon review of the staff comments, we decided that we'd like an opportunity to discuss the comments with staff and see if we can revise the application to address their concerns.
Very well. There's also 4 letters of objections from neighbors. You have them all, so you should take the time as well to reach out and see how you can all work together, if at all possible, before you do come in for the next application. Hopefully there's more favorable feedback from the community.
Yes, understood.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Milne Price? None. All those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary Treasurer, anyone else waiting or raise their hand?
Madam Chair, I don't see anybody else for requesting deferral.
Okay, very well. Then we'll take the first matter in our agenda, which is now CAV 002 of 2024. Welcome to the first meeting of January of 2024, everyone. And here we go. We kick it off with 117 Burnett Street. That's CAV 002 of 2024 at 117 Burnett Street. And I do have a letter of objection from a Mr. Robert Becker on file. Who's the agent? Oh, Mr. Dome again. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
I was wondering why you were still here. Go ahead.
Yes, hello again. My name is Joe Dome, 133 Torresdale Avenue, agent for the owner. This is a relatively straightforward application with one variance proposed for an FAR of 49.53%. The proposed rear heated sunroom will not contribute to any negative visual massing impact of the dwelling. The house will retain its existing look from the streetscape, and as the addition is not visible from the street and replaces a previously existing covered deck, it's just slightly larger. The proposal also meets the bylaw for lot coverage and setbacks. Furthermore, across the street, just a few houses north, 104 Burnett Street was approved for a full 2-story massing with a very similar FAR, 39%. The massing of this dwelling is actually more visually impactful from the street. And as per the staff report, planning staff have no concerns with the application. I've seen that there is one letter of concern posted from a resident about 5.3 kilometers away. I also note that that in that letter, there's no immediate context noted in those comments, especially pertaining to the existing massing on the street, such as at 104 Burnett. And overall, we feel the application is quite reasonable and minor in nature. I'd be happy to answer any further questions you may have. Oh, apologies. I think you're on mute. I can't hear those comments.
Did put myself on mute. I was asking about the engineering staff's comments with respect to the grading issues that they foresee with the proposed development, if you had any comments on that.
Yes, to speak to drainage, so for the building permit, the application would need to satisfy staff. Efforts would be made to ensure that the drainage is sufficient for the permit. And I'd also like to highlight that the application does comply with the lot coverage and setback bylaws, and as well as the proposed patios also comply.
Okay, any other questions of Mr. Doan? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What was the existing floor area? Or what is it now before the proposal?
I can get that number. Excuse me. Fortunately, I don't seem to have that number in front of me.
What's the size of the addition then?
Yes, one moment. Yes, if you go to plan A 1.3, see the size of the addition at the rear. I believe it's 25 foot 6 inches by 15 foot 9.5.
You good at math, or you're going to rely on me? 29. I guess my point was, what was the FRA percent before? Did it exceed the 42%, or was it already too large for whatever reason? I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying that to see what that was, what it is now, or what was added, just to see. Like, to me, the increase is 17.9%. So I'm a little bit concerned about how high that number is, whether that's considered minor or not. So I'm just trying to give you the opportunity to point out exactly how much is being added in square meters.
Yes, I don't see that in front of me right now, but it's I believe it would be. I believe the existing dwelling would comply with the bylaw, so the remaining FAR would be over. However, given the fact that it does comply with the bylaw for the lot coverage and for setbacks, and it's one-story massing, we do feel that the impact would be very minor. It would not be visible from the streets. So, and I would point out also, as I mentioned earlier, that across the streets, the house at 104 has an almost identical FAR, was approved, and it's actually a full 2-story massing. So the impact of this would be relatively minor and out of sight from the streetscape.
Well, what I see, when I asked the question of you, I wanted to give you the opportunity. I see that you're adding about 31 square meters, which is over 3,000 square or 300 square feet. So I was just trying to see, so that's for a sunroom, that seems to be on the large side. I recognize it's only 1 story. But you're also exceeding the bylaw by 17.9%. There's where my concern is. To me, that house sits on the lot. It seems, I don't know if it sits, obviously it can't sit closer to the front yard setback, but it seems to be larger and more of a mass than the other houses on the street. I don't know if that house it wasn't like the front central portion that was built new. That wasn't an original building that was added to. I didn't think that was the case, but I kind of wondered, there's some odd designs there that I just didn't know. That's what I was trying to get a handle on what the existing is versus obviously we know what the proposed is.
Well, I certainly wouldn't say that the massing of the dwelling as existing is larger than the other houses on the street. I point over to the house next door as basically a very similar massing, but then if you look across the street, there's I'd say 3 out of the 4 dwellings across, or rather 3 out of the 5 dwellings across the street have a larger massings, and 104 would be among them. Also on the same side of the street, it's not 101.
Don't get me wrong.
It is 105, I believe. 105 is also has a larger massing. So yeah, the massing wouldn't change from the front of the house, and is as existing. It's actually smaller for a visual impact.
Did it get smaller than?
Sorry?
It's actually smaller than what?
Smaller than a number of the neighboring dwellings. So that would be 105, 105 Burnett, 103. So like the massings just from the outside and across the street, 18 directly across the street, 118, and 104. So there are basically a number of dwellings existing, that the existing built form on the street, I would say is equal or larger in massing. And as I mentioned, the actual visual massing of the application would not be changing at all from the street.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Any further questions of Mr. Dome at this time? Go ahead, Ms. Yu.
Thank you. This is a question to the town planner and the agent. So I can see from the submitted drawings, I can see they also propose a gazebo. So that's the area of the gazebo come into the floor area of the entire residential.
Through you, Madam Chair, the gazebo area does not contribute towards lot coverage or floor area ratio. So for the variance itself for floor area ratio is just for the proposed sunroom, but the other gazebo and patios do not contribute towards that number.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions? Is there anyone in the audience or members of the public that have called in with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There are no phone calls up to now.
Okay, very well. Then we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to start the ball rolling and move a motion? First one of the year, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then we'll make it a positive motion. Madam Chair, I'm prepared to move this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. From my math, it looks like the existing house is already a little over the floor area ratio, and the variance represents about 75%, or the addition represents about 75% of the variance. I find the sunroom to be appropriately proportioned and for the house. I don't believe there will be any impact. I'm satisfied that draining issues will be worked out at the site plan or the building permit stage. I would note that there was one letter of objection, but as the applicant said, I find the same, that the objector is not an area resident, nor does the objector actually raise a specific concern with respect to the variance that's being requested. Madam Chair, I'd make that approval subject to 2 conditions: that the rear addition be built in general accordance with the survey site plan dated September 11th, 2023, and the elevations dated October 10th, 23, and that the variance expires if a building permit hasn't issued within 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tusk. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Have a good night, Mr. Dome.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Application CAV 004 of 2024 at 559 third line. Again, it's CAV 004 of 2024 at 559 third line. Good evening, Ms. Jonker.
Hi.
Go ahead. You're the representing agents. Go ahead.
All right. So my name is Natasha Jonker. I'm the agent for our clients at 559 third line. Our client is looking to remove the existing 41-foot front porch that's currently on the home and replace it with a larger veranda that has a cold room below it. The current porch protrudes into the front yard by 9'8", and the proposed porch is only to protrude by 8 feet. Based on the comments we received, there are no comments on the application from town staff, and staff's of the opinion that the proposed design complies with Oakville and the setback is relatively uniform along the street. We believe the application is minor in nature and should not create any impact to the adjoining properties. So this photo that we've prepared is just a representation of what the home may look like once the project goes forward and is completed.
Very well. Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Jonker at this time? Any items of clarification? Okay. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There are no phone calls at this time.
Okay, then we'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit and having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and the presentation by Ms. Jonker, I'm satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. The proposed veranda or porch will have little to no impact upon the streetscape, and is consistent with the built form of the existing dwelling as it sits and the neighborhood. So I'll put forward a motion of approval. That would be subject to two conditions, those being that the front porch be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated November 13th, 2023, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit's not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Talski, you get to go on a extended siesta, but don't worry, we won't leave you there for too long.
I just want to make sure that nobody else has conflict on those applications. No, thank you.
All right. Ready to start? We're going to start with application CAVA 005 of 2024, bug 257 at Dempster Lane. Who is the representing agent? I have Catherine McEwen here as the listed agent.
Yeah, she's just promoted.
Hello. How are you, Ms. McEwen?
Good evening. My name is Catherine McEwen from Frisiak Urban Planning, 277 Lakeshore Road, Oakville. So as you know, we've got a number of variance applications, 12 before you. So
yes, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I would like to group them. Okay. And if you'd be amenable to that, I'd like to start with CAV 005. And it's of the same variance submission for 009, 0112, and 015. Are you okay with that? Now, we're going to have to move each of them separately, but we can certainly hear the discussion and the reasoning and see the presentation for those ones that have the two variances of the 10% landscape entirety of the block, as well as the 1.5 to 3 meters in terms of the landscape buffer, okay?
definitely, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, so we'll start with those 4, and then we'll take the rest of them together, as the other ones just have that one variance that is the same.
And if you're okay with that, I'll kind of do a general overview, which kind of covers all of them, but this speaks to the ones with both first and.
Sure.
Pull up
We've got the
anything
time.
specific.
I just wanted to kind of condense things rather than doing it over and over
Definitely.
again.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the subject lands are located in North Oakville on the north side of Dundas, east of Meadow Ridge Drive, within the Joshua Creek neighborhood. Next slide, please. We're requesting variances for 12 back-to-back or village townhome blocks within the registered plan, 1270. For all blocks, we're requesting that the minimum landscape requirement of 10% be calculated on a block basis rather than a per unit basis. And as just discussed, for the interior blocks, block 238, 251, 254, and 257, we're also requesting that the minimum landscape area be calculated based on a dimension of 3 meters by 1.5 meters, whereas an area of 2.4 meters by 2.4 meters is required. Next slide, please. The next slides are, I don't know why all those notes are showing, anyways. The next slides are all of the plans for the blocks that were submitted with the applications. As illustrated on these plans, the minimum landscape percentage for each block ranges from just under 12% to over 14%. These calculations don't include smaller landscape areas on the block, such as in front of some of the interior units where there is landscaping, but it's not a large enough aggregate to count. As well, it doesn't include the landscaping that will be provided on the boulevards. If we were to include these areas, the total cumulative landscape percentages per block range from 17% for the interior blocks to over 25% on the corner blocks. These percentages well exceed the 10%, and we believe they meet the intent of the bylaw. Other North Oakville back-to-back townhouses that have been built, ones that are zoned neighborhood center, there is no requirement for a minimum landscape percentage, and zoning has recognized that there probably shouldn't be for the GU as well. And in South Oakville, the minimum landscape requirements are calculated on a block basis, which is the same as we're proposing. The tree canopy coverage requirement, which is 20% for the entire subdivision, has been exceeded. That was done through the subdivision review. And the proposed dwellings exceed the zoning requirements for lot frontage, lot depth, side yards, and front yard setbacks also. I think maybe we could skip to slide 15. So these are just some illustrative renderings to give an idea of what the proposed dwellings will look like. We feel these variances are minor in nature and satisfy the 4 tests. That concludes my presentation, but if you want to go back to any specific block, well, I'd be happy to do that. I've got my list kind of how they are in order, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McEwen. Any questions or items of clarification? Okay. Has anyone called in with respect to these applications, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There is no phone call at this time.
Okay, thank you. So whoever moves these will have to move them individually. So we can start by doing that. Who would like to start moving a motion? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the first batch here. The ones that we're going to deal with together, the first 4 here. With respect to these applications, I'll speak generally, and then I'll put forward a motion for them individually following. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, having heard Ms. McEwen's presentation, I'm satisfied that the requested variance for each of these blocks are will not present a negative impact. They're consistent with the planned function and the intent of the bylaw. These are urban condition back-to-back townhouses that are individually not intended to provide a significant amount of landscaping, but in the totality meet the intent and interest for the totality of the area. So I am satisfied that these the requested variance conforms to the tests. So I'll put forward a motion of approval. And so on the basis of CABA 05 of 2024, I am satisfied, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to the condition that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. And I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed, and that was CAV 005 of 2024. Moving on to CAV 009 of 2024.
Likewise, Madam Chair, I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to my previous rationale, finding that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. That motion would be subject to the same condition that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note also that there were no members of the public present with raised issues with respect to the matter.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Application CAV 012 of 2024, that is CAV 012 of 2024.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Likewise, same rationale as previously noted. Put forward a motion of approval with respect to CAVA 012 2024, finding that it conforms to the four tests of the Act. The motion would be subject to the same condition that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision. If a building permit has not been issued. Also noting that no members of the public were present or provided feedback with respect to these matters.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. And finally, CAV 015, and that's at bulk 251 at Birkins Way. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Madam Chair, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms with the four tests of the Act. Accordingly, I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to the standard condition that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued, noting that there were no members of the public present or providing written input with respect to the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Discussion on this recommendation. Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Okay, so now we move on to the bigger bulk, and that starts with application CAVA 008. I'm going to just read them for the record, and then we can move them faster that way.
Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I just have
Yeah.
to remind you that you are moving with 006, not 008.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I just realized that when I was looking at it. I had written them in order here, but I have 006, 007, and then at the bottom of the page, the rest of them, and I started reading from the bottom of the page, so I apologize. Okay, so we're moving application CAVA 006 of 2024 at Dempster Lane. Yeah, that's block 285. And then CAV 007 of 2024, also at Dempster Lane, and that's block 256. CAV 008 of 2024 at Muller Lane, that's block 255. CAV 010 2024 at Antonia Trail, that's block 239. And then CAV 011 of 2024 at Perkins Way, and that's block 250. CAV 013 of 2024 at Muller Lane, block 253. CAV 014 of 2024 at Perkins Way, and that's block 252, and CAV 016 of 2024 at Antonia Trail, and that's block 237. So Ms. McEwen, you can speak to all of these since they all have the same variants, and then we'll move them individually afterwards again. Unless you don't have anything to say and everything you said before applied, and then they can ask you questions. It's really up to you.
I did cover it in the initial
Okay.
kind of presentation, but if anyone needs any more clarification, I'd be happy to do so. As mentioned, this block is just for the single variance to look at the landscape requirement of 10% calculated on a block basis versus a per unit basis.
Okay, very well. Any questions of Ms. McEwen? Maybe you can just highlight the last four that we dealt with on the block that you had in green. And then we can move forward with the remainder of them.
Sorry, which,
The slide that you had with all of the block.
so did you want to start with block 258? That's application TMA.
No, I just wanted to see the difference between the 4 that we just moved with the 2 variances and then the rest of them with the 1 variance on your drawing.
Okay, just give me a second here. So if we can get slide 3 up.
Yeah, that's the one.
So for this group of variances, we're just requesting that the landscape be calculated on a block basis. We're meeting the minimum aggregate requirements, which is 2.4 by 2.4, as you can see denoted in the red dash. If you go to slide 4. The previous ones, we had also requested relief to change that shape of the aggregate.
Okay,
If that makes sense.
yes, it does. I just wanted to highlight it, what the
Sure.
difference is between
And if
the 2.
anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. If we can just pull out of the Zoom. Yeah, thanks. Okay, any questions? Who's ready to take the baton from Mr. Hardcastle and move this group? Give it a go, Miss Hugh.
Thank you.
So we'll start with the CAV 006 of 2024 at Dempster Lane.
Thank you. Yeah. Having undertaken my site visit and having reviewed the application materials together with the staff reports, having heard the presentation done by the agent, in my opinion, this variance meets the 4 tests under Planning Act. As such, I'd like to move a motion forward to approve this variance, subject to 1 condition. The approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? The application has been approved, none opposed. Okay, CAV 007, bulk 256 at Dempster Lane.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, the same rationale, and I'd like to move a motion to approve the variance for this block, subject to 1 condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for this proposed construction.
Thank you, Ms. Hugh. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in favor? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. CAV 008 of 2024 at Muller Lane.
Thank you. Same rationale, and this variance meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and therefore I'd like to move the motion forward to approve the variance, subject to 1 condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Okay, any discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? The application has been approved, none opposed. Okay, application CAV 010 of 2024, block 239, Anthonia Trail.
Same rationale, having reviewed the application materials and the staff report, I'd like to move the motion forward to approve this variance, subject to 1 condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Any discussion on this recommendation? See none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Application CAV 011 of 2024 at Perkins Way, that's block 250.
same rationale as other variants that I mentioned earlier. So this variance meets the four tests under Planning Act. And I'd like to move the motion forward subject to the one condition that approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Discussion? See none. All those in favor? The application has been approved, none opposed. Application CV 013 of 2024, Block 253 at Muller Lane.
Same rationale, I'd like to move the motion forward to approve this variance subject to the standard condition. The approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Discussion? All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Application CAV 014 of 2024 at Perkins Way, and that's block 252.
Yeah, same rationale. The variance meets the four tests based on my review, and I'd like to move the motion forward to approve this variance subject to one condition. The approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Ms. Yu. Discussion? See none. All those in favor? Application has been approved, none opposed. Final one of this block is CAV 016 of 2024, Anthonia Trail, and that's block 237.
Okay, thanks. Same rationale.
It's okay, take a breath.
Yeah, I need to take a roll. Thanks. So this variance meets the four tests under the Planning Act. As such, I'd like to move the motion forward to approve this variance subject to one condition. The approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hughes. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Application has been approved, none opposed. See, thank you, Ms. McEwen.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Okay, we can bring in Mr. Talowski and see what he's been up to for the past 5 minutes.
I ring the bell.
See, we didn't keep you waiting that long.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're at application CAV 094 of 2023, deferred from July the 12th of 2023. And this is at 37 Pebble Ridge Place. Again, that's CAV 094 of 2023 at 37 Pebble Ridge Place. If you're interested in this application, please call 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have Mr. Ian Robertson as the agent.
Hello, Madam Chair. Can you guys hear me?
Hello, good evening, Mr. Robertson. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. So my name is Ian Robertson, and my address is 20 Rivermead Road, Concord, Ontario, and I'm the agent acting on behalf of the owners for 37 Pebble Ridge Place. We are here today for 3 minor variances for our project. The first being garage area, second being RFA, and the third being building height. Before I get right into my presentation, if we could skip to page 2, just as a note, I'd like to mention that we do have 4 letters of support, 2 on Shorewood Place, and then 2 on Pebble Ridge. We also previously had a letter of objection on Shorewood directly behind us in previous applications before the committee, and we had subsequently had a conversation with them and resolved any concerns that they had at the time. I do understand there's one more letter of objection, but it's my understanding there's several streets northwest of us, and I think they're probably outside of the circulation area, and I'm not sure how their objection is impacted by our proposal. So our proposal is for these three items I mentioned. If we could skip to page 4. Thank you. Our first request is increased garage area. As you can see in the highlighted blue on the left side of your page, we're looking for an increase in garage area to 68.69 square meters. This is to help facilitate parking of 2 cars, as well as outdoor amenity space stuff such as lawnmowers and gardening equipment, etc. We don't have a space or provisions for a cabana or other accessory structure, so we like to keep everything neat and tidy within the garage. It's my understanding that planning is in support of this, so I won't speak too much to it, but happy to answer any questions regarding it at the end of my presentation. Our second variance will be for RFA. We're currently looking for a 2.7% increase to 31.7% from the 29 that's permitted. And this application, this variance, if we could skip to page, sorry, if we could skip to page 4 or 5. The RFA is an interesting beast. The planning department had concerns with the size of RFA in relationship to building height and connected the two of them. I would suggest that there isn't a connection to the two of them, and I'm going to let you know why. If we look at this floor plan of our second floor, bedroom 5 is in the top right-hand corner, and if I were to remove bedroom 5's closet, washroom in itself, effectively removing our 2.7% RFA or 514 square feet, the exterior front facade of the dwelling would would still look the same as what it currently looks like, but we now comply with RFA. So to connect RFA and building height as the planner had done, I don't think there's a relevance there. A secondary note to that is if I actually remove bedroom 5, the washroom, and the closet, reducing my second floor area and my RFA, a different portion of the bylaw kicks in where it says that we now have less than 25% of the area above the garage, and therefore the garage area itself would have to be calculated in RFA, therefore pushing us up another 68.69 square meters, or about 4% in RFA. Those calculations, as you can effectively see, would never actually change the massing, shape, or size of this building, but the technicality in nature. And so it's our belief that the 2.7% increase has no bearing on building height or building mass, as I illustrated in this image here. And our third variance is building height. And we're currently looking for a 10.08 meter height compared to the 9 meters that's permitted. And I want to note that this is the third time we've come to this committee looking for variances. And in our very first application a year ago, the planner on board at the time appreciated our 10.03 meter building height, had no objections, and was willing to support that in the committee at the time, but he had concerns about coverage and lot drainage and a few other things. We're now back to 10.08, which is the same number, more or less, but for a couple of centimeters of what they would previously have approved. I'd also like, if we could flip to pages, we can toggle through these for building height. If we go to page 8 to start with, the committee has approved several homes in the area now since this street was developed. And if we go through 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, the committee can see how our dwelling has minimal impact in comparison to all the adjacent and approved dwellings in the area. And I would suggest that our sloped pitched roof that effectively illustrates 1.5 story in all the elevations adjacent to properties brings down the scale of our property, or scale of our design, where it pertains to the neighbors who are northwest, northeast, and the pathway to the southeast, west. And looking at this, I would suggest that our RFA doesn't have any bearing on the building height, and the building height has no bearing on the RFA. And they each have their own merits as to why they are suitable for this area. And you can, I guess I mentioned, flipping through these approved elevations of other projects, you can see ours fits in with the scale and streetscape of itself. And I think that's where I'll end my presentation right now, but I am happy to answer any questions that the committee itself might have.
Questions? Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the consultant, you talked about just what we had on there. We had what I think was page 12. I got the impression you were saying there was other sketches of the other houses in your presentation, the other adjacent houses or houses on that street.
Yes, pardon me. Sorry, I thought you were finished. My apologies.
Was there other sketches in that presentation that we didn't see?
Through you, Madam Chair. If you look at pages 8 through 12, you'll see our elevation on top, and then you'll see the adjacent houses down below with our house in behind shaded. Does that make sense? Do you understand? So on the lower image,
Just flip through them slower.
Pardon me?
They just flip through them slower. Don't whip through them.
Oh.
It's not his control, it's town staff. So if you want town staff to give you a moment, just ask them.
Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Dickey, when you're ready for the next one to flip, you can ask.
Oh, okay, yeah, please flip to page 11, I guess it is. Okay, at page 12, I think we saw before. That was. Oh no. It wasn't. Okay. Thank you. As far as those sketches, what I see, and I could be wrong, again to the consultant, your roof height seems to be 8.75 feet. It seems to be, oh, I'm sorry, I should ask, is there a reason why you have to have that roof height so high? We often see roofs at 5 feet and 6 feet. There's something in the design that requires that.
Our roof differs from the majority of the houses that have been approved on the street, such that a lot of the other ones have significantly large flat roofs and significantly steeper roof pitches, creating more of a square massing. Whereas ours has a traditional pitch on it. It still has a flat portion in the center, but the pitch roof is significantly lower than the remaining houses or the majority of the houses in the area. The style of house is what suggests what type of roof would be on there. Some of the other ones are mansard style. They have French inflections or whatnot, and ours is a farmhouse of sorts, so it would have a more traditional roof on it. If the planner could flip to page 7, this sort of illustrates our roof and all the areas. Well, I'll let her pull it up there if she could.
Just a moment, please.
Perfect. Thank you. As you can see, the area in yellow is our main dwelling, the central hub of our building at 10.808 meters. and the light purple are all the areas that are dropped below this line. All pitched roofs except for the central section there where it's indicated with flat. And just to give you an idea, it's almost about a 50-50 split between the yellow and the purple roof pitches. And those numbers there, just to give you an idea, on the left-hand side, there's 9.39 to the peak of that one. On the far right side, it's at 9.65 meters. To the rear of the property, it's 5.54. And at the front, where the 1.5 story gable is, it's actually at the 9 meters peak there. And so those elements is what I was speaking to as far as reducing the overall massing adjacent to neighbors to the rear, to the left, and then the parkette to the south or to the right.
One other question, or hopefully only one. In those examples we were looking at before, I forgot to ask, do they have height variances? Are they under the 9 meters or under? The other ones on the street?
Several of them, if you actually flip to, if you could flip to page 2, I believe. Yeah, page 2. This is an indication of variances that were approved in the area. So 53 Pebble Ridge was 2 doors beside us at 9.5. Across the street from us was approved at 9.52. Lot 15 was approved at 9.89 in building height.
All of them are below what you're substantial.
Well, 9.89 is a mere 8 inches, which is nominal. I think in an overall grand scheme of things, when you're looking at it in perspective. And number 53 and 52 at 9.5 meters are higher than our point of contact that is adjacent to those properties, where I had 9.39, I believe, on that side. So
is
when
that
you look at
because
the
of
street,
grading, Mr. Robertson?
actually, our house was pushed out of the ground from the time we started to design this project several years ago to the time we got to our July hearing last year. As-built drawings for sewer systems were actually provided, and they actually raised our house by 0.3 or 0.4 of a meter to begin with. So that actually impacted our height, and we actually had to reduce it.
Okay. Sorry that I interrupted, but I can't see anyone because we're still on that sheet, so I had to speak up. Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Obviously, my concern is over the height. I think I've asked the question that I like answered, so thank you very much.
Mr. Dickey, if I may, one of the comments from the town planner at our February 2023 meeting was in support of our 10.03 meters. And what his comment at the time was, and planning might have it there as in a quote, I don't have it word for word, but his conclusion was the appearance of our dwelling from the property line would be approximately 9.08 meters as it would appear. And I know the town of Oakville has commented on that, the appearance of the dwelling versus the actual dwelling compared to the established grade. And they were in support of that 10.03 meters at the time, and we're only 0.08 now, a small difference from that point.
I'm sorry, but you didn't get approval for that in February, did you?
We did not get approval for that, but that was actually one that they had put forth as they actually had no objections to that one. They were willing to approve that that height. They had no objections at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or items of clarification? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that you've played around with your roof form a little bit and your roof heights a little bit, but there's a couple of things that stand out to me, and I'm trying to look to understand it. First, when you did the comparison, on those sheets. What was it, 8 through 12 or whatever on the presentation? You've overlaid other buildings in the area against yours, whereas this building is significantly longer than the other buildings. You see that family room side hang out, if you will, past the length of the other buildings. You know, and you made an assertion that that GFA and height are separate from, but when you read a building from a street, you're seeing a length, you're seeing a height. What is your thought in terms of its contribution towards the perception of massing and size? Do you see that would contribute to the massing and size?
So interesting. I'm glad you asked. So what we had done initially was, just for context for those overlays, is we actually kept the base point was all the established grades for each lot. So in order to be consistent, so in case there's any concern as to where the building height was, it's all taken from the established grade. As far as your family room being set back, so we have an irregular shaped lot. We have the most irregular shaped lot in the subdivision. And we utilize that space to create our shape. Now, that family room, well, yes, it is elongating the massing of the house. It's actually set back from the dining room, which is the next closest space, by about 13 or 14 feet. So it's not actually the primary mass of the house. But in addition to that, it's actually set back 60 feet from the property line. And it's there at the curve of the road. So when you're actually going down the street, you don't actually see the impact of that family room until you turn the corner and headed towards like lots 9 and 10. And it's actually minimally impactful on the actual streetscape itself.
Okay. Now, with that rationale in mind, did you look to explore that being a one-story component within the floor plan, efforts to reduce the height of that component?
So it is only a 1 story. It's actually a 1.5 story. We have a vault ceiling in that space, but there is no buildable space above there. We have a fully vaulted ceiling with that dormer, the triangular or gable end dormer, and it was there as balance for that whole space. So, but it is only a 1.5 story. We didn't build over it.
And yet it exceeds the bylaw requirement for height.
Yes, it does. The reason being is in order to keep consistency, the roof pitch itself, the front to back roof pitch on the main roof, I believe is a 15-12 roof pitch. And it's not typical that we would alter that roof pitch. So in order to keep things consistent, that also has a roof pitch. And when it goes to a peak, in order to get the center line within the room, of the vault, it drives that number. The reality is if we wanted to chop off the top of that by 1 foot or 2, we could. I'm not sure that if that would have any impact on the actual streetscape massing or adjacent properties, given the fact that we are beside that walkway and there is no way in that general direction. Lot 9 is skewed to the southwest a little bit. So, but I mean, that being said, you know, if that came down, I mean, like you guys have approved 9.5 meters on 2 of those and 9.89 on another one. You know, I wouldn't be in a much objection to making a reduction to those roofs to satisfy committee. The purpose of my overlays is to show that there wasn't a drastic difference in the roof of all the adjacent buildings that are approved in the area, and the architectural control guidelines for which we have approval from stipulates things like articulation in the building footprint, roof heights, material, dormers, etc. And if we actually flip to page 13 in my presentation, there's an excerpt there that illustrates several images in the bottom right-hand corner with projecting and protruding elements, 2 stories, 1.5 turrets, as well as dormer details over top the garage being recessed. And I would say that our house and our elements mimic these, several of these in different contexts. And if you flip on the same page, if you actually note the highlighted areas on the left-hand side, things such as dividing larger buildings into smaller elements. If you look at my design, we have a garage element, we have a central element, we have a third right-hand element where that family room is. And those are done with articulation in the building facade, which is part of their guidelines and requirements, to break up the overall massing. And they want varying heights, architectural components that reflect human scale, horizontal detailing to de-emphasize the mass. We have a horizontal banding of stone that, even though we are long, we actually have 3 components of this dwelling. If we continue to go through these things, I think we meet a lot of the requirements of these guidelines, which is why we have architectural control approval in this dwelling. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Tulowski, you had some questions as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question for the applicant, one question for staff. So Mr. Robertson, when I look at July 12th and January 24th, I really see no difference in the plans, which leads me to ask the question, why did you defer the July if you were just going to come back with essentially the same application?
Through you, Madam Chair, Mr. Tulowski, I appreciate that question, and I actually have a good answer for you. We in the July meeting, it was noted by committee that dealing with the planning staff had been difficult on several applications, and trying to get some information prior to application dates rather than getting it 3 days prior to and not being able to address it. Subsequent to our July meeting, we had conversations with the planning department. We had gone back and forth and had discussions, and they talked about lowering the height a little bit. They talked about the office, which is the main central gable, being a little large, if we can make that smaller, shorter, narrower. And they talked about some of the windows being oversized, which is actually interesting because the oversized windows is actually something that the architectural guidelines speak to and request. But regardless, we compromised. We brought our family room window from a 4-pane window down to 3, and we brought our office window from a 4-pane window down to 3, and we also reduced the heights of those windows. We resubmitted those to the committee, or we resubmitted those to planning, and we got an email back from Mr. Riaz, and I'm going to quote him. He says, "Staff appreciates removal of the lot coverage, interior side yard setback variances, and the modifications made to address staff concern." So when I read that, to me, it sounds like they've appreciated the changes that we made to our built form. They were minor in nature. However, the building height goes back to the February 1st approval, and there was no further communication after that because their appreciation for our efforts to satisfy staff's concerns is sounds pretty, sounds like we have planning on board with us. And then having looked at all the applications that have gone before and then after our application, I would look at all of the GFAs approved, and I look at all the building heights approved. And in general, our application follows suit with ones that have RFAs of 34%, 31.5%, 31.75, 32.36, a coverage number of 35.9, and building heights in the 9.5 to 9.89 meters. I would say that our 10.08 meter height isn't far off of any of those. And as I mentioned earlier, if we were required to bring it down to 9.89, I'm sure I could take half a point off my roof pitch or a point off my roof pitch to do so. But what makes a street interesting and desirable is articulation, different masses, different projections, and different elevations. And I'm not sure that the 8 inches to 2 feet, I guess, at the roof height at 9.5 and 10 meters in the air is actually going to have a negative impact on that street.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McKnight, different question, similar context. When I look at the initial elevations versus the current elevations, I essentially see no difference. So how is it that, as the applicants asserted, staff supported the roof height initially, but now with fewer variances doesn't support the roof height? Why did staff change their mind?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, we, as you all know, we review each minor variance application on a case-by-case basis. In this scenario, we do have a unique property that does have frontage not only onto Pebble Ridge Place, but also a public walkway. So this warrants review of the streetscape and massing scale and transition to the public walkway. The variances brought forward are a slight reduction from previous iterations of the plans received. And I do recognize that building height was not spoken of concern in February specifically. However, that application was not supported by staff due to massing and scale concerns in association with other items. So staff had continued thorough review of the variances and feel as though the building height does contribute to massing and scale specifically in relation to the public walkway. We do appreciate the articulation of the building of the front facade. However, it is that viewpoint from the public walkway that does pose of concern.
The public walkway was there in the initial applications. Isn't it inconsistent if in the initial one staff didn't tie height to scale and massing, but in this application they are tying the two together? It seems like staff's being inconsistent on the same application, not different application and somewhere else on the street. It's the same property.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I recognize that the walkway was there initially in February as well. There were other major concerns that were pointed out at that time, and so the walkway was not the focus of the review. However, at this point in time, that was caught as more of a focus. I apologize that this wasn't communicated more thoroughly at an earlier point in time, though.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Robertson.
If I may say something towards that, I would like to note that our setback to that walkway is greater than the required setback. For starters, it's we're at 5.09 at the closest portion of the house, and we are greater than that at the front corner of the dining room. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but looks to be closer to 6 meters. I'd also like to note that our setback to that walkway is actually further today than it was February 2023. We were closer in the application in February than we are now, because we had subsequently removed and reduced our coverage from non-compliant and a variance to compliant. And by doing so, we actually shifted the house further away from this walkway. It wasn't our intention necessarily at the time to have the extra buffer to the walkway, but at the same time, we are in excess of the minimum requirement. And if I were at the minimum requirement, I could also be at 9 meters to that space also. So now I'm slightly higher, but I'm also slightly further away, and proportionally it's probably the same aspect if you're looking at it at a perspective point of view, right? I'd also like to note that the coverage issue in my February application was we were looking for a couple of extra points in coverage because they had concerns with drainage, and even though drainage isn't a concern for committee, it was concern for planning, and we removed that entirely through this whole process. So we have compromised and listened to staff's comments, and I feel very in tune with Mr. Tulowski's comments as to I'm not sure why things change at every one of my applications. There's a different point of contention that wasn't relevant in the previous one, and I would suggest that my 31.7 RFA is no different than any other massing on the street. And I would suggest that my 10.08 could be reduced to 9.89 if it satisfied the committee. And my garage area, of course, I think is supported by planning, but my application, I don't think is very much different than anybody else's so far approved. And my numbers are less in some cases and a little more in other cases. And I appreciate Madam Chair for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Are there any questions or items of clarification further to this discussion? Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There is no phone calls at this time.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, I can't seem to see Ms. Yu. Hold on.
Madam Chair, I just need to advise you that she has to take off from the meeting and she's not going to be back.
Oh, okay.
She has
All
to.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So then let's take the matter into committee. Who would like to start the discussion? Give you a couple of minutes. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Talski.
Chair, Madam Chair, I'm going to take a contrary view to staff on this application. I found the presentation very helpful, insightful. Slides 8 through 12 to me showed that this application is not only not that different than several other applications this committee's approved, but I think when I see the designs of the house compared to some of the other ones, I believe this is going to be far less impactful to the streetscape because of the design and the roof line. And to Mr. Hardcastle's point, when you look at it in two-dimensional, it looks like it's significantly longer than all the other houses. But I also note the applicant's comments that it's set back like 60 feet, I believe he said, from the streetscape. So, and when I see the three-dimensional that was at the beginning of his presentation, it gives me a completely different perspective than looking at the two-dimensional drawings in the staff report. And I'm troubled by the concerns changing based on each application. If staff had no issue with the roof at 10.03, I fail to see how they have an issue with the roof at 10.08. And it's effectively the same thing. And concerns shouldn't change when the applicant addresses the initial concerns. I recall when the first application came, I think I spoke to this, and I believe my comments were in its totality of all the variances, I couldn't support it. I think the applicants made an effort. They've removed some variances. I will grant it's not significantly different, but the removal of the coverage I think was significant, and I believe that was also the concern of the neighboring property. And I find it compelling that we've approved a lot of variances since this came through initially, and I don't see this one as being the most impactful to any of the other ones that are on the street. Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be approved and is applied for. I would note the one objection from property again at some distance. I would make the approval subject to house being built in general compliance with the site plan elevation dated August 29th, 2023, and that the variance expire within 2 years if a building permit hasn't issued, and I suspect this motion will generate a few comments.
All right, discussion on this recommendation. Mr. Dickey.
Madam Chair, I am going to disagree with this motion. I indicated while talking to the consultant, I have concerns about the height. He points out that other houses on the street have heights of 9.5, 9.52, and 9.89. We don't know anything else about these houses. If he presented that information, we could look into it. I might feel differently, but in my mind, you've gone beyond the limits of the 9.5 and 9.52. I would normally think, yes, that wouldn't have been anything that I would red flag me, but anything above 9.6 is a red flag to me. And therefore, I consider you take a closer look at the plans, and in my opinion, the height variance is excessive. So I would be voting against.
Okay. I tend to agree with Mr. Talowski. In looking at it at face value, I saw that there was not a lot of changes made, but then when in comparison with everything else that's on that streetscape, I can see the applicant's point of view, and I see how it fits within that lot. That's my opinion. Mr. Hardcastle.
First one back in January, and you're making me think. I'm in the middle of a cold here. Thank you so much for making my brain work a little bit here. I think I come to the same conclusion as Mr. Talowski through a slightly different route, and I certainly have some objections to the rationale and the way things were presented by Mr. Robertson. And I do believe that there are some efforts that could be undertaken to mitigate and minimize some of these numbers. The height variance is large, and the building is wide, but and those two things I do believe contribute, in a general sense, contribute to perceived and overall massing. That being said, the recessed nature of the family room, the well-articulated facade mitigate, and I think to an acceptable degree, mitigate the impact on massing. And I've come around to support the motion on the floor through perhaps convoluted process, but I'm there.
All right, there you have it. So no more discussion. Let's put it to a vote. All those in support of Mr. Talowski's motion to approve. All those opposed. Thank you, Mr. Dickey. So the motion has been approved with one opposed. Have a good evening, Mr. Robertson.
Thank you. You all as well.
Okay. Application CAV 153 of 2023 deferred from November the 1st of 2023. And that is at 415 third line. Again, it's CAV 153 of 2023 deferred from November 1st at 415 third line. I have, I'm not sure who Mr. Van Kulen. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Van Kulen.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Curtis Van Kulen, Hughes Design Studio. I'm representing the owners of 415 Third Line this evening. We're back in front of you with a slightly reduced proposal. We're seeking two minor variances, one of which for the RFA and one of which for the front yard setback. The purpose of my presentation today is more to highlight the changes that we've made in an effort to reduce the overall massing and the impact of the two-story dwelling on the existing single-story dwellings. So if staff could flip quickly, I'll just walk through a couple of the items. If staff could flip quickly to the next page. And the next page. So you see here, we've reduced the second floor size a little bit and pulled in the second floor slightly, adding some opportunity to add some roof slopes. Those roof slopes you can see mainly over top of where the garage is viewed from this elevation. Will buffer the massing in relation to the single story dwellings on either side. Furthermore, the reduced roof elevation of the family room does add quite a bit of a depression in the overall scale of the two-story dwelling, which furthermore decreases the massing. And then if staff would go to, I believe, page 5, we've introduced on this side elevation, we've introduced a pretty long roof shape on this side as well. Again, breaking up the two-story massing on that side. There's a portion towards the front that actually drops down. The main roof eave height drops down, reducing that massing slightly. And then if staff could flip back quickly to the last page, page 4, sorry. Yes, that kind of sums up all of the roof massing changes and introductions in order to, again, reduce the massing and the impact of everything. We are also requesting a front yard setback reduction, mainly to a front entry feature. It's pretty minor in nature. And then we've taken off the roof height variance from the last proposal. And then those are basically the main changes that we've addressed. We do have 9 letters of support. So we've canvassed the area quite well. I do note one letter of objection from a number of streets away, which I think is in line with what we've been seeing this evening. I do note staff's comment from forestry in terms of the driveway and the street tree TPZ that's going to be required. So we're going to be working with town staff in the forestry department to make sure that our driveway proposal makes sense. And I think that is it. Overall, we feel these variances are minor in nature, meet the 4 tests, and we do have planning staff support. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Rankunen or items of clarification at this time? Okay, I see none. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plan, the building elevation, my site visit, together with the presentation by the owner's consultant and the planning staff's report, I am satisfied that the variance is minor in nature and conform to the 4 test Planning Act. I'd also like to acknowledge the 9 letters of support from various property owners on the third line, and we are aware of the letter of opposition from the owner at 332 Sunset. We're aware that that is further afield, but we also, as the members are aware, of persons concerned in another previous matter before the committee. I put forth a motion that the application is applied for be approved, subject to the condition that attached dwelling is constructed in general accordance with the plan and elevation drawings dated September 9th, 2023, and the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision. The building permit and driveway permit not being issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. All those, any discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening. Okay. Application CAV 119 of 2023 deferred from August the 23rd at 1067 John Laird Circle. Again, this is CAV 119 of 2023 at 1067 John Laird Circle for an uncovered platform addition. Good evening, Ms. Medvira.
Good evening. Perfect, thank you. So before I begin, for the public record, name is Stephanie Matviva. I'm with Glenshire and Associates, the registered agent, on behalf of the owner. Could I have the next slide, please? The property before us tonight is municipally addressed as 1067 John Laird Circle, located on the north side of John Laird Circle in an evolving neighborhood. The neighborhood can be understood as having an eclectic character, given there's a diverse range of dwelling sizes and styles. I could have the next slide, please. The application before us today is for a rear yard patio, really a deck, actually. The image on screen here is just an image of the existing rear yard deck that is to be demolished. This image also indicates the existing rear yard conditions. So you'll notice there is a privacy fence along the shared property line with the adjoining neighbor to the north. There's also mature vegetation on the neighbor's side. These features contribute to preventing adverse privacy and overlook concerns. If I could have the next slide, please. So again, the application before us tonight is for the proposed rear yard deck that's shown on screen with the bowling. The deck before us is the result of collaborative discussions with town planning staff. We've reached a position where we are mutually satisfied. This was achieved by reorienting and overall shrinking the size of the deck. So the staircase has been reconfigured to this, call it a U shape, really. So it would extend from the rear yard deck into the rear yard amenity area in a way that it will not provide for adverse privacy or overlook concerns. The rear yard deck is being requested to facilitate a natural and logical extension of the living spaces. It's also to better facilitate and accommodate the family's changing needs. This rear yard deck proposal triggers the need for one variance to permit an increased encroachment into the required rear yard setback. The variance is phrased in a way that it's to permit an uncovered platform. It is to permit the rear yard deck. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is just the official wording of the variance. So again, it's to permit an increased encroachment of 3.41 meters into the minimum rear yard requirement, given that the deck is greater in height than 0.6 meters from established grade. If I could have the next slide, please. Just very quickly, here's the proposed elevation of the deck. So for public safety reasons, it will have a railing. And sorry, if I can go back 2 slides to the site plan. Thank you very much. Yeah, that one, perfect. So part of the conversations with planning staff and the property owner, the proposed rear yard deck is to be shielded from public view. So it is well positioned on the lot of an appropriate size for the lot as well as for the family. There's privacy fencing along the shared property lines. Adverse in privacy and overlook concerns will be addressed and mitigated through the provision of these privacy fencing, plantings along the shared property line, as well as landscape areas in the rear yard. for the rear yard amenity area. So just to, in closing statements here, as outlined in our submission letter, it's my opinion that this proposed variance is largely technical in nature. It's to reflect existing site conditions, the unique site topography, and that there's a change of grade between the front and rear property lines. In my opinion, it meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. I'm happy to answer any questions that there may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medviva. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Ms. Medviva? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
To the consultant, you said there was no overlook or privacy concerns, but in that view from the existing deck, I would kind of question that. I wonder if we could see that again, Madam Treasurer. The view
Right.
from the deck looking out towards the rear fence. And for the consultant, you indicated there's trees, et cetera, that will mitigate against that overlook. I didn't notice that in that picture either. So if you could explain or expand on that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So through the chair, it's a misphrasing to say that there is no overlook. It's to mitigate overlook, adverse overlook, and privacy concerns. So to make sure that there are no adverse privacy or overlook concerns, that's achieved through, again, the privacy fencing that is elevated. So it's a little bit raised compared to what would normally be the case in the typical rear yard, given the change in grade. So the fence itself sits above a retaining wall. So just by that nature, it provides a little bit of additional shielding. There's additional visual shielding that's provided by additional plantings that will be provided on the private property side. So on the owner's side of along that rear property line, as well as on the sides, because this is kind of a pie-shaped corner lot. It's a little bit of a unique situation, but those are the ways that any adverse privacy and overlook concerns will be dealt with.
From what I see, the deck is 8 feet 7 inches above the grade. From what I understand, the grade of the houses to the, I'm not quite sure about the north, but the houses to the west, starting on the 8th line, would also be 8 points above, 8 feet, 9 feet below the grade of the deck. I can't imagine your fence being above 10 feet high, so it won't really, and I don't see how the fence is really going to help for the neighbors to the rear on the 8th line, not feeling that that deck is overlooking their private backyard. You'll have to explain that to me. Thank you.
Sure. So through the chair, the privacy fencing will help. It's not to suggest at all that there will be no overlook, but just to emphasize, this is an existing condition. It's quite common in this area. Because it's an evolving neighborhood, these homes were built with decks that extended off of the ground level. So again, just because of the unique lot circumstances, it is a little bit elevated compared to some of the other development standards. But again, it's an existing condition. These privacy fencing, I hear the concern, I hear your point. It's not to say that the privacy fencing is going to completely shield, but the combination of the privacy fencing, the additional plantings that granted will take time to mature, but will be provided nonetheless, as well as the landscaped area within the backyard, so the rear yard amenity space. Those 3 factors combined will assist in making sure that there's the potential for adverse overlook and privacy concerns are mitigated appropriately.
Mr. Talowski, you had raised your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Medviva, time like this, I wish we were in council chambers. I'd ask you to pull out a plan and a red Sharpie and draw a line to show me the extent of the variance.
So that I can answer, if I can have the site plan again.
Okay, good, because if I'm reading it correctly, there's a triangular portion that involves the stairs and some of the deck below it that are this subject of the variance, but the majority of the deck complies. Is that correct?
So through you, Madam Chair, so the reason the variance is triggered, and actually, I don't know if I can have just to confirm, can you see my cursor or no? Okay, sorry.
There is no.
So
way.
on the site plan, there's a dimension indicated of the 3.06, which is essentially the measurement of the pinch point between the perimeter of the deck to the rear property line. And that dimension is what triggers the variance.
And we're going approximately 1.9 meters further. And then if we drew a line parallel to the property line, that would give us the extent of the variance?
Correct. So again, just to confirm and to clarify, the reason that this variance is triggered is partly due to the configuration, but mostly the mention of the stairs. So if the stairs, and given the elevation of the deck, so if the stairs were configured in a different fashion, if they were essentially half the size in width, then this variance would not be triggered. But again, to make sure that we're compliant with public safety standards, this is a standard construction practice. So the need for the stairs in this orientation, for them to be of the width that they are, that's what triggers the variance.
Thank you.
Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. To the consultant. Why couldn't you move the chairs to the south and take it down the south part of the deck where you have a much bigger, deeper rear yard?
You, Madam Chair, so that was part of the conversation, is it's almost like a game of Tetris of how can you best accommodate everything. So there was a desire on the owner's part to make sure that the deck and its overall area is functional. So for example, to be able to accommodate a compact, but nonetheless, a fairly standard table and chairs, a certain area is required. The other consideration is if the stairs were to be moved, it would actually make the variance worse. So again, we had a bit of a play of Tetris of where is the best position for the stairs in relation to the deck. I would highlight again that versus the initial application that was provided last year to the committee, the overall size of the deck has actually been shrunk. So again, there is effort made to try and figure out how can we best accommodate everything. So that includes the owner's livability of this deck, being able to make sure that we're able to comply to the extent that we can with the zoning bylaw, making it a functional and livable area. So I hear the concern. This is not to say that this is maybe the best design, but it is the design that we came up with to best accommodate everybody's desires and needs.
These homes were built with these decks anyways, right? So you're not asking for anything other than you're not increasing it,
well, no, we are. So
you're
we are
still
asking for a little bit larger of a deck, but
it's still within the approved bylaw.
Yep.
Spacing is what I'm saying. You're not asking for a variance on size. You're not asking.
No,
is what I'm asking.
No.
Yeah.
The only variance that we require is again, because there is a pinch point and it's largely related to the unique configuration and corner positioning of the lot. So again, it's triggered by the positioning of the staircase in relation to the rear yard property line.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any other questions or items of clarification?
Madam Chair. Okay.
Yes.
just to clarify, there was an existing deck and it must have been only 1.5 meters encroaching on the rear yard. Otherwise, it would have been illegal itself. So am I correct there? And it must have been 6 meters from the rear fence. Otherwise, it would have been encroaching. Now, are we saying there was deck that was there was complied to the zoning bylaw, and now we're building a bigger deck?
Correct. So the existing deck was built at the time that the home was constructed. So it's a standard builder's deck, for lack of a better way to put it. So it was smaller in size. It did not project beyond the main rear wall of the dwelling to the extent that the proposed deck is. So it was built in compliance with the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, you're right, it would not have been permitted.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, has anyone called in for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer? I do know there is one letter of objection.
There are no phone calls this time.
Very well. Let's put it to a motion. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you confirm that you can hear me? I've been having problems with my audio.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can hear you
thank
just fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation, and thank you, Ms. Matt Viva, for that, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. In terms of a general understanding of my thought process on this, it is an existing, the presence of a deck and the overlook condition and the geographic context is an existing situation. It is exacerbated to some degree by the new deck and the configuration of it, but the greatest proportion of the encroaching deck is in the stairs and in that corner, if I'm understanding this correctly. The impact is not appreciably different with respect to the setback. So I believe that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act, and I'll put forward a motion of approval. That motion would be subject to
conditions.
The three conditions that are proposed that were identified in the staff report, those being that the rear uncovered platform be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated October 13th, 2023, and elevation drawings dated May 11th, 2023, that the applicant prepares a landscape planting plan which details a future planting shown in the site plan dated October 13th, 2023 to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the owner implement the landscape plan prior to issuance of a building permit, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there was one letter of objection received, and the commentary provided by the applicant has satisfactorily addressed the concerns, in my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in light of the letter of objection from the neighbor, I just wanted to add to Mr. Hardcastle's comments, which I support. When there's a perceived impact, in this case overlook, I think it's very important to understand whether the variance actually creates the impact that's being highlighted. And in this case, the applicant can build a very large deck with the same overlook condition and comply with the bylaw. And the variance here is probably for the less useful corner of the deck that I just don't see how this variance is causing the impact that has been raised, and as such, it should be supported.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Any further comments? Mr. Dickey.
Just thought I'd bring forth that I disagree with the motion. I feel that the adjacent owner to the rear has a valid concern. I feel that the deck could have been positioned if it had been positioned in another part of the rear yard, it would be further away from the rear fence and therefore have less of an impact on the adjacent owners. And therefore I figure that the existing proposal is not minor in nature, and therefore I will be voting against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Dickey. All those in support of the motion to support the application? Okay, the application, and all those opposed? Thank you. The application has been approved, one opposed.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ms. Medviva. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, the last item of the night on our agenda is CAV 173 of 2023, deferred from December the 13th at 86 Wilson Street. Again, it's CAV 173 of 2023 at 86 Wilson Street. Who is the agent for this application on the commercial building with an application for a third roof, third story with a rooftop terrace? I have Hamia. I can't pronounce the last name. I apologize. I'm not going to try because I don't want to. I don't want to.
That's okay.
Do it wrong.
No, I've done that for the last 12 years. So it's Hamia Agaimibali.
Oh, okay. I'm not even. No.
Yeah.
Can I just call you Mr. Hamia?
Please, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. The proposal in front of you is in the process of site planning application. We have been doing a lot of back and forth with the staff, planners, transportation, forestry, everyone. We are adding a third story to the existing two-story commercial, which is changing occupancy to a dental office. Third floor is not going to be any operational or any kind of dental office for patient. Is technically added to the building to support the staff, and it's technically restaurants, balcony. It has a lab, 3D lab, which does not require anyone to work at. It's there mostly for research and implant. What I'm trying to say is third floor is not adding to the traffic. So having said that, our main variance is the number of parking spots we need, which we wouldn't have if we wouldn't add the third floor. At the same time, we could get rid of that variance, but to do that, then we had to technically damage or get into the tree protection zone, which with the discussion we had with all agencies, at the end we figured that it's better to go with a variance and do not touch the end of the site, keep it as is, make it accessible, and staff were in support of that. In terms of the traffic, they asked us to provide them with a report, making sure technically right now the existing dental office with the same number of rooms, they have the same number of parking spots. They have no problem with that, and they're always that most of the time have at least one spot extra. I can't say always. At the same time, to be more cautious about that, we are putting a report to, in case that the parking was full, how we're gonna manage it. The owner is even considering having conversation with the neighbors to rent the parking from them in case they need that, which we highly believe it's a very rare occasion if that happens. The other variances are mostly the existing situation of the site. If you need any specific explanation on that, I can do that for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamaya. Who would like to ask any questions or items of clarification? Okay, has anyone called? Oh, Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Sorry, seems to be my night tonight for questions. I'm sorry, to the consultant, I thought you said that there's been no reduction in the number of parking spaces, but from what I saw, I thought you had 14 spaces before and now you have only 9. Is that correct, or did I read something wrong?
Sorry, can you say it again? You got cut off in the process. I couldn't hear from the last part.
I thought, from what I saw, or interpreted, you had 14 parking spaces, and now you have 9 parking spaces. You seem to indicate there's no change to the parking space.
Oh, no, that's what I said was we had those, we could provide those, but in order to do that, to have that number of parking, we had to injure the trees in the back of the site, right? And in order to keep that, in a meeting we had with forestry, transportation, and planners, we figured it's better not to do that and instead go with a variance and get a variance for that. So we keep the trees, like we do not touch at the back of the site.
A couple other questions. Again, tell me what your presentation was. I thought you said that you had a traffic study. We haven't seen it. Does the traffic study address the number of parking spaces and whether they will be enough to accommodate the dental office?
We in the first, so I think you know that we have a conditional approval of the site plan application, which in our first submission we submitted that. We required 12, if I'm not wrong, and then during the process, so after the conditional approval, we had that meeting. So in order to provide that 10-meter radius for the handicap transportation inside the site, and not to touch the tree protection zone at the back, we shuffled the parking spots. We tried different combination. That was the optimized optimum combination we could find that would technically help us to preserve everything as is, have the accessibility in place as well.
Obviously, my concern is the number of parking spaces. And so let me just get a clarification on something here, because you don't seem to have a parking study that addresses whether 9 parking spaces will be sufficient to accommodate the clients and employees of this dental clinic. So in your plans, on the ground floor, you have 4 rooms that are shown as being OPs. And on the second floor, you have 3 rooms that are shown with the initials OP. Are those rooms that are going to have a dental chair in them?
Yes. So in the first floor, one of the OPs are for kids. In the second floor, one is for handicap, and one of the OPs is for the new patients to do all the technically the tests and everything they need to do. So based on the way this practice is going, at no time, technically 99% of the time, all the OPs are going to be occupied. And again, if we wouldn't have the 3rd floor, which is no OP in that, technically we wouldn't have the variance. The only reason that variance is triggered is because of the 3rd floor, which we won't have any patient in that. It's technically for the staff.
Yeah, but you're building something and you need a variance because you don't have enough parking. And the square footage of the 3rd floor is taken into account when you deal with parking. And if you weren't putting your staff lunchroom, etc., on the 3rd floor, you might logically have to put it on the 1st or 2nd. So let me go back to the aspect. You have seven rooms with dental chairs in it. How many dentists would you expect to be working at any one time?
There will be, including the owner and his wife, at the time, it's usually 5 dentists working.
Say that again, how many?
5.
5.
Max, it would be 5 to my knowledge, yeah.
Okay, so you've got 5 dentists. I'm assuming the dentists aren't riding their bicycles or anything, so there's 5 parking spaces of your 9 parking spaces that are gonna be used by the employees. I assume you're gonna have a receptionist, you may have the person that cleans your teeth, and whatever else. So even if you have that, you've got seven employees and only 9 parking spaces, so that leaves only 2 parking spaces for your customers. And every time that I go to the dentist, there's already somebody in the chair, and I'm waiting out in the office. So that means for every dentist, there could be 2 people using up a parking space at any one time. So to me, I just cannot add at all how 9 parking spaces will be big enough for a dental office that has 7 dental chairs and possibly 7 employees. So I'm open to an explanation. Thank you very much.
Sure. So first, for the first question you had in regard to staff room and lunch area, most of the dental offices, they don't have that. Most of dental offices, they don't even have labs. Most of dental offices, they don't have changing room for their staff. Most of those are staff change their room, their clothes in the washroom. So technically, what the owner is trying to do is elevate the quality of workspace for their staff. Right now, they have the same amount of staff in Oakville, and they have same amount of parking. They have no problem. Having said that, I just got a text message from them, and the owner was like, at the same time, most of the time, we are like 3 dentists. And I should say, as I said, 2 of them are the husband and wife, which are the owner and his wife, and they drive 1 car. Again, with that 3rd floor, it's adding to the quality of the workspace. Not that it's not having that, it's not adding the GFA to that. And at the same time, they are having that in mind to, if in case they have any problem with the parking, to rent that. Saying those things, most of even dental offices in Oakville, most of them inside the city of Toronto, they don't even have a parking spot. Not that I'm saying we shouldn't have that. All I'm saying is there's always a way going around it, but this dental office is not densifying the number of like patients. It's just giving more space to them, and if we put it on average, it has way more parking spot than most of the other dental offices. I understand your concern, which I appreciate that. It's from experience of their work right now with the number of patients they have no problem with 9 parking spots. And they are trying to, one of the reasons that they have all these issues at the same time is they're trying to make it accessible. They're adding the elevator for the accessibility. The bigger up on the 2nd floor is for accessible reason. And all these things together with the turning radius for that, again, with so many back and forth with city staff, this was the best solution we found for this.
Yeah, I would object to your point about other medical buildings having less office or less parking spaces, because the normal zoning in Oakville, 1 parking space for every 18 square meters of medical space. So I see that in the zoning bylaw. You look it up. It doesn't apply here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it does. All I'm saying is I disagree with what you're saying about what would be normal in the rest of Oakville. The other thing I'm concerned about is you said there's other somehow you're going to get permission to park on other lands in the vicinity. I know there's 2 funeral homes there. I've been in those funeral homes numerous times. There's parking all over the street. Well, now where if your clients can't park in the parking lot, or not all of your clients can park in the parking lot, it's going to be more parking on the street. You say you have an arrangement for for overflow parking for your client?
I didn't say we have it. The owner is planning to have that. They haven't started that. Again, in our meeting with transportation, that they asked us to put together this report for them. Otherwise, we wouldn't even get the SBA approved completely. So we have to show that how we're going to manage in case of lack of parking.
Why wouldn't you do that first before you come to the Committee of Adjustment?
Sorry?
Why wouldn't you go through those arrangements first before you come to the Committee of Adjustment and asking for a reduction in your parking rate?
To get that agreement before coming to here, to this meeting, we are in that process. In the process, we don't. So here is how it got very much complicated. So our project is not that big of a project, right? At the same time, we have to go through SPA, which at the same time we could not go through the zoning review before, unless we would apply for the building permit. We could not apply for the building permit unless we would have our SPA done. We couldn't go to Committee of Adjustment unless the SPA is happening, and while that's happening, both of these were overlapped. We are kind of stuck between all this like process, and we are doing those in steps, and it's just because of that, like it's happening in sequences that the staff guide us through, and we are following that.
Thank you very much.
Anything further? Okay, I see none. There's no calls. Let's take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, my experience with medical office peaks is like a shopping mall in the Christmas season. No bylaw can accommodate everything potential, but I don't think we have the luxury of the committee of speculating what the use in the building may be, whether it's 7 dentists, has enough parking. The applicant could put 7 dentists in the existing building and have the same amount of parking. Our job's to interpret compliance, general conformity with the bylaw, not what we think it should be. In my view, Madam Chair, this application is a compromise of competing interests with respect to the parking, the turnarounds, the landscaping. Given, Madam Chair, that this parking is based on square footage, not use, I'm satisfied that this is an appropriate compromise, appropriate intensification of this building. I would note that there's been no objection. It's also known the applicant's back due to an unfortunate typo before Christmas. But we could deal with this tonight. Madam Chair, I'm going to move approval of the application, finding it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And I would make that conditional on the proposed addition being constructed in general accordance with the conditionally approved site plan and elevation drawings dated July 31st, 2023, and that the approval expires within 2 years if the building permit hasn't been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Oh, okay, go ahead, Mr.
I was just going to say up front that I disagree with this. I would disagree with this motion just on the basic fact about what I was speaking about, number of parking spaces. So go ahead, sorry.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. And reflected in your discussion prior to the motion. Okay, the motion before us is to approve the application as applied for the reasons that Mr. Talowski already mentioned. All those in support of the motion? Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, Mr. Dickey, your application has been approved, Mr. Amai, and with one opposed. Thank you and have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, we have confirmation of minutes of December the 13th. I don't believe I was there, so who would like to confirm the minutes? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. It is 9:15, motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. We are adjourned. Madam Secretary.